All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. It's Antiwar Radio. I'm Scott Horton, and I'm about to talk with Matthew Hoh, and I'm desperately stalling and trying to pull up his bio. Too late here. I'll try again. He's a former Marine Corps captain, former State Department employee in Afghanistan and Iraq. Welcome to the show, Matthew. How are you doing?
Good, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
I'm sorry, I'm way behind this week. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit better?
Yeah, no, you're pretty good there, Scott. I served in the Marine Corps for 10 years, including a command of a company in Iraq in 2006, 2007, and I worked on State Department teams in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Most recently in Afghanistan, 2009. I'm now the director of the Afghanistan Study Group. We're a network of foreign policy and public policy professionals or practitioners or experts who are advocating for a change in strategy in Afghanistan.
Okay, now, in 2006, James Baker, Sandra Day O'Connor, Vernon Jordan, and many extremely powerful establishment players came together to basically try to provide George Bush an out from the Iraq War. Would have had us down to current troop levels or lower by 2008, if I remember right. And instead, they went with the surge. But that, if I remember correctly, sir, that commission was appointed by Congress. It was an act of Congress that set that study group in motion. Was this the same thing, or this was just Steve Clemons said, let's try to get some people together to do this on an ad hoc basis? Yeah,
we are definitely not a formally organized or funded effort. It was just kind of as you described. Steve Clemons about 10 months ago said, we need to pull people together and start, questioning the assumptions of this war, start questioning the strategic purposes of it. Not question like whether we're doing it right at the tactical or operational level, but like are our purposes there even matching up with what our vital interests are? Our goal, one of our goals, is to see the creation of something similar to the Iraq Study Group, a formal commission that would actually provide a plan, provide an alternative to the current strategy as well as to whatever would be we see come out of the December review by General Petraeus.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, I guess it seems like when you have the neoconservative right, who will never back down on anything and have their great echo chamber effect, that really what was going on in 06, for example, was, I don't know to say the establishment is to group a lot of individuals together, but you understand it was sort of or at least what I'm getting at necessarily, I'm not saying you agree, but it was, James Baker and Sandra Day O'Connor and these kinds of people. I mean, James Baker III by himself. That means that it's okay to cut and run because James Baker said it's okay to cut and run, right? Like when William Odom came out, and he was General William Odom, who was the head of the National Security Agency under Ronald Reagan, said this is ridiculous. We should have been out of here a couple of years ago. Let's go. Then that makes it a little bit easier for the politicians. They have a little bit of cover for their right flank, and the establishment assent to their conclusions, that kind of thing. And that's really what you guys are going for here too, right? Because everybody knows this war is ridiculous. It can't win. We're not fighting for the majority like in Iraq. We're fighting for the minority that have no legitimacy whatsoever in power. And it's all a big joke. We just need the right group of people to say it's okay for the politicians to admit that or something. Am I making sense?
No, you're making that was very very nicely worded, Scott. There's political realities of how policy is made. I don't like it, you don't like it, but it's the reality of it. And so, that is one of our purposes is to push the debate on Afghanistan, to enliven the debate on Afghanistan, to make it much more prominent among the public. It probably won't happen until after the congressional midterms, but the latest polling puts the people in disfavor of the Afghan war in the high 50s and into the low 60s. But unfortunately, when you ask voters what their top 5 concerns are, the Afghan war barely breaks that top 5. I mean, that's understandable. There's a lot going on, and people are so disconnected from this war. Very few people know anybody who's serving in it. We're certainly not being taxed, to support it. So if you don't know somebody who's over there, you're really distanced from it. But certainly getting back to your points about the political reality of it, hey, in international relations 101, the first thing you get taught is that, foreign policy is ultimately the reflection of domestic politics. And so that part of our purpose is to enliven the debate, enlarge the debate, and not let it get swept under the rug. If your listeners refer to the Washington Post story from Saturday, or the Wall Street Journal article, I believe, from today, it talks about how senior administration officials are downplaying the significance of the review scheduled for December. Well, that should not be the case. We should have an actual real debate on this war, and not just have a review that just rubber stamps the current policy.
Well, I note here Steve Clemens has a piece at Politico.com, Rethinking US War in Afghanistan, where he sort of is giving an introduction to y'all's study group here. And he quotes Henry Kissinger, saying Afghanistan has never been pacified by foreign forces. And it seems like, come on, if Kissinger says don't bother with continuing killing people, I don't know, can't we call this thing off yet? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it is frustrating. I just had a note sent to me right before I came back in my office and got on the phone with you guys, and so I haven't been able to check the veracity of the quote, but supposedly Colin Powell referenced it, Afghanistan in the last day or two, and said something along the lines of it doesn't look like we're winning there, or it doesn't look like this is going to work out. So again, you've got men like Colin Powell. You had last July, you had Fareed Zakaria, and then Richard Haas, the former president of the Council of Foreign Relations and now the current president of the Council of Foreign Relations, 1 week from each other come out and say, this isn't worth it. We're not winning, and it's not worth it anyhow.
Zacharias, the new president of the Council of Foreign Relations?
So he's the previous president, and so Richard Haas is the current, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, you had those guys 1-2 each other, 1 week after the next. So you're having, get back to your point about the establishment, key establishment figures, now saying, hey, we gave you a year. Last year when the review was going on, we didn't pass judgment. We said, let's see if this works. And a year later, it obviously is not working. It's not even that not working, but it's counterproductive. The Taliban has grown in size since last year. There are certainly any metric you look at in terms of casualties, whether it's civilian casualties or coalition casualties or IED attacks or anything, assassinations. It's all trended negatively for the last, not just the last year, but the last 3, 4, or 5 years. So it's a counterproductive strategy, not just failing, but it's making the enemy or the opposition in Afghanistan stronger, and it's destabilizing not just Afghanistan, but most of the entire region.
Well, and you said this while you were still in your official capacity and then quit, right?
Yeah.
Or were you fired?
No, I quit.
Well,
if I had been fired, I probably would have been able to get severance.
Oh, right. Yeah, gotta get your severance pay there. That's my money, by the way. All right. So, tell us about the circumstances of that. What was it that you wrote? I remember reading it in the Post, but it's been a while here.
Sure. It was just about a year ago. And if, like we talked about earlier, my background, and my goal was to be a career government civil servant, to be a policy guy, either State Department, Department of Defense, or intelligence community. But after doing this every day for 7 years, a couple of times in Iraq, now in Afghanistan, and being here in D.C. working on this every day, I just had enough. The mainly with our leadership. The things I saw in Afghanistan last year were so very similar to the mistakes and the dishonesty, the lack of critical thinking, the lack of intellectual honesty that pervaded our policy making, so from 2003 through 2006 in Iraq. I found that to be the same in Afghanistan. So there were a number of different of reasons why I resigned, but ultimately it comes back to that. Was that?
All right, well, let's hold it right there. That's a good place to pick it up after the break.
Okay.
We'll be right back, everybody, with Matthew Hoh